Greetings and happy hello. Dustin Sanders broadcasting live from beautiful New Smyrna Beach. This will be our second post of, who knows, maybe an infinite amount of posts that we'll be able to do. We're taking questions and answers. We're also taking in letters. I haven't had a chance to talk about this one, but this letter was actually dated back Friday, May 27th. This was in 2011. I received this letter at about 9 o'clock p.m. Most of my followers on videos were watching me or following me through MySpace. MySpace is kind of obsolete now, so everything has seemed to go to Facebook. But this is probably one of the more interesting letters that we've ever received concerning any topics or any variant amount of conversations. Seems to be a legitimate letter as much as I've been able to analyze it. I don't know that it is 159% authentic, but I figured we'd share it to you and read it to you and let you see let you determine what you make of it. Again, it was dated Friday, May 27th, 2011, 8:57 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It says to whom it may concern, and it appears to give an alias, but it says from the Secretary of Division, says Bureau of Secret Intelligence. It says, greetings, my name is, lists an alias, asked to remain anonymous, and even if I didn't, I'm sure that's an alias anyway. Or such and such. It says, for authentication and to validate the pertinent information I'm about to share with you to be true and accurate. He or she gives some background information for me to be able to follow up, and I did, and we'll go into that on either video 3 or video 4. But it says, I am one of the leading interests of an independent research and development corporation called ID, or Intelligent Design. I thought this was very interesting because we were just, on the last video we were going to touch on intelligent design versus the Big Bang or evolution, whether or not there is a God, or whether or not we were created, or whether or not we evolved, or whether or not somehow through evolution we had been created or created ourselves through evolution, vice versa. It says, I am one of the leading interests of an independent research and development corporation called ID, or Intelligent Design. It says, our organization was specifically designed for the research, study, and development. Our organization was specifically designed for the research, study, and development of cosmic future weapons of warfare. Again, this was the supposed sender was Bureau of Secret Intelligence. I have since looked that up on Wikipedia. It appears that the Bureau of Secret Intelligence did exist. Whether or not it still exists, or at one time did exist, I don't know. If I'm not around in a week, I guess we'll find out if it does exist. Wikipedia has very limited information about the Bureau of Secret Intelligence. They have maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs total, and it looks like it was dated back almost at the turn of the century. And then after that, you never hear about them again. So I don't know. We'll find that interesting. Again, if I'm not here by this time next week, something happened to me. But it says, our organization was specifically designed for the research, study, and development of cosmic future weapons of warfare, time travel, which we talked about, photonic levitation, which is a phrase that I thought I had coined, or cloaking teleportation. It says, I'm not writing presuming that you or any of the other world's leading various widespread intelligence agencies have any knowledge or expertise of what I'm talking about, but nonetheless, this is what we do. I'm like, okay. It says, to give you a little bit better, a clearer understanding, he says, our work encompasses such things as cosmology, which we're very familiar with, of course, theoretical physics, applied mathematics, and then some things that I would have limited ability to speak on, like quantum non-locality, gematria, which is the Jewish form of symbolism and or numbers as they pertain to words. It's one of the ways that the Holy Bible, or at least the King James Version, appeared to have been decoded. The Holy Bible says relativity, extra-dimensional physics, which of course I'm very big into, and the like. It says, over the past many years, our goal and objective has been to preserve, and I found this very interesting. The gentleman says, or lady says, our goal and objective has been to preserve and secure the privacy, confidentiality, and species of our clients. And at this point, I'm kind of thinking to myself, okay. But I think I get what he's saying. He's saying, our clients, you may ask. Yes. He says, there are celestial bodies and bodies terrestrial. But the glory of the celestial is one, and the glory of the terrestrial is another. as you have found out by now if you're receiving this predated letter. And I'm not sure what he meant by predated letter, but I found it interesting because he says that the celestial is one and the glory of the terrestrial is another. And I knew that in my studies and in my research that I had read that before. That I had read that before somewhere, but I couldn't figure out where. It comes to find out that was that verse or that scripture, that wording that he used was actually found in. I noted 1 Corinthians. Was in the first chapter of Corinthians. So I found it interesting that the Bureau of Secret Intelligence would have any knowledge about the Holy Bible, but evidently they know everything that there is to know about it. He says, I must tell you candidly, it does not yet suffice us to reveal the peculiar identity of who and what we are experiencing, but in time you will know just as you have been fully known. And again, another reference right out of First Corinthians, and I thought to myself, that's very strange that a government agency uses the verbiage or verses, line of dictations out of the Bible. He said the purpose of this letter is to allow yourself and the rest of the world space to repent. Under the authority several years ago at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the Terrestrial SETI, that's SETI corporation, we followed some of your older posts, and this is what I found was so interesting. And evidently, I had spoke to them, but I didn't recall speaking to them. This one, was dated 2011, and apparently I had spoke with them as early as 2009, 2010, unbeknownst to me, and I didn't know that. But he says, under the authority several years ago, the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Terrestrial SETI Corp followed some of your older posts on the original MySpace. Seeming now out of date and up to par with your newest postings on Facebook. So I saved this one for Facebook now, and I guess maybe what they were alluding to was that Facebook was the way I'm reading it, that Facebook was a new and upcoming thing, so maybe I would go to Facebook. And hey, here we are. Facebook, our questions are as follows. Now, so here they go, and they're writing, they say our questions are as follows. And I'm like, okay, great. So how can we help you? I'll have my people call your people, We'll do lunch sometime or something. He says our questions are as follows. Do you think that time travel is possible? He says, and if yes, how would you or could you prove it as it pertains to the grandfather paradox? I suppose I should lay a little foundation and tell you or explain to you what the grandfather paradox is, if most of you don't know, or if many of you don't know. The grandfather paradox is an idea, or a paradox for that reason, involved with time travel. It says that if you, the concept is that if you have, or who you are now, and you were born through your father, who is in turn born through your grandfather, if your grandfather was still alive, and you were who you are now, and where you are now. If you travel back in time to kill your grandfather, the paradox that exists, or the question that's being allowed, is that at the time that you killed your grandfather, would you then cease to exist at the very moment in time that you killed your grandfather? But if you continued to exist and you were able to go back in time and kill your grandfather, then the question, of course, or the paradox is, how did you ever exist in the first place, or in the beginning? If you really start dissecting it and thinking about the grandfather paradox, you can ask that question about, I've come up with at least 20 or 25 different ways. So you're saying if I go back in time and I kill my grandfather, do I cease to exist, or do I continue to exist? But if I continue to exist, then how is it that I had ever existed, since my grandfather obviously gave birth to, and grandmother gave birth to my father, who in turn gave birth to me, and then of course, how would the decision, or the craziest part is, how would we have ever arrived at the wording or the transliteration of, or even a thought of the grandfather paradox or of time travel in the event that we had already gone back and killed our grandfather? So how could we be at this moment in time discussing the grandfather paradox if, in sense, that had already happened? So then it becomes just an idea. So, but the question is, he says, do you think that time travel is possible? And if yes, how would or could you prove it as it pertains to the grandfather paradox? The question simply was, do I think that time travel is possible? I think that anything and everything is possible. Maybe within bounds, maybe within certain limitations. I don't know. Even within the mind, within the power and the ability to create something in your mind means therein lies a chance or a possibility of it existing. Now, whether it's existing in your reality or in your life or in your particular lifespan is an entirely different question. If I think of time travel, I know that time travel exists. Why? Well, because I thought of it. So the thought, even in itself, lends credibility to the existence of time travel. Can I do it? I don't know. Maybe we are. Do I have a spaceship to set back the watches and clocks in time? No, I don't have that. And that's ultimately what we're looking for. We're looking for the means or the capability to do time travel. So when we talk about time travel, we have to really analyze what particular type of time travel, or what is time travel that we're talking about. And that's a weird phraseology to say, but when we say what is time travel that we're talking about, time travel has variance. It's a very interesting thing. Are you talking about traveling back in time? If I go now and I think about travel, if I think of when you were, say, 15 years old, 15, 16, 17 years old, something dramatic happened there. Maybe you lost your virginity. Maybe it was the first time you got drunk. Maybe it was the first time you ever tried a cigarette. So something dramatic or something that sticks out in your memory may have happened there. Yeah, 15, 16, and 17. So if I think of going back in time to when I was 15, 16, and 17, that's actually very easy. But if I think of walking up to myself back in time at 15, 16, or 17 years old, then the potential for time travel becomes arrested. Because inevitably what we're saying is, oh, you're just asking me if I want to time travel now or if I wanted to travel back into where I was. So if I say if we want to travel back into where I was, what am I really saying? I'm really saying that I want to travel back into where I was spiritually, more or less. Because if I travel back into where I was, I have to travel back into where I was in the spirit. Now, if I come as the person that I am now in this time, in this formatted time, not in a spiritual sense or not in my spirit, but if I go in this time, then I'll need to actually travel through space and time in order to achieve what I call physical time travel. So there's a lot of different time travels. At least there's a lot of different time travels to me. You have physical time travel, pertinent time travel, and spiritual time travel. Spiritual time travel to me is the catch-all or the all-encompassing phrase of what time travel is and can be. So I think spiritually, if you say like in a God sense, is anything really impossible? If you believe in God, is anything impossible to God? The answer is no. Then if the answer is no, that means that all of the different questions that we could raise all have positive yeses, and amens. I found that very interesting because there is a scripture in the Bible that says, and all of the promises of God are yes, yes, and amen. And they actually mention that in this letter. So I believe time travel is possible. I think that there's a lot of different types of time travel. Whether or not I could load up in a machine and travel back in time, that would be like circumferencing the earth. There's a point. There's a part in the Bible that says he sits on the circumference of the earth. So to actually load it up into a machine and then for everything around me to evolve, or for me to travel over the circumference of time. See, now we're talking about you start talking about the circumference of time travel, or he who sits on the circumference of the earth. We're talking about the potential for 15 to 20, I'm counting up to maybe even 25 different types of time travel just limited within that one capability of having a time machine. If you time travel in a time machine means that you sit and you pull the levers and here we go, we're going back in time. Now time begins to spin around me, or time is movement underneath me. There's a difference. If I stay stationary, if a UFO approaches me, if I have a window here behind me, if I see a UFO out there and he says, "Hey, this UFO has the capabilities of time travel," then I know what I have to do is I have to approach time travel not just spiritually anymore, but I have to approach time travel mathematically. In other words, I have to go back to energy equals mass times circumference squared. the constant state or the maximum potential for speed or for travel at that point becomes 186,000 miles per second. I think that's roughly 6 or 7 times around the world in 1 second. That's pretty fast. For my memory, I think light takes about 8 minutes to travel from the sun to the Earth, something like that. So if I change my dimension or my perspective on time travel, if I go here and I pull the levers, boom, time begins to move under me, or time changes around me. Time doesn't necessarily change, but watch what happens. I would stay here and I would move through time, where I would sit on the circumference of time. We've seen the movie The Time Traveler. He pulls the levers and everything starts changing around him. You know, it's like fast camera. It's like, you know, there goes 400 years, another 400,000 years. You know, and that is the potential for time travel. If I put time travel in jurisdiction, in other words, if I walk out of this room and I go out onto my porch and there's a UFO there, and the UFO has the capability of time travel, I'm now going into some of the laws of physics that are required to do time travel. Okay, not just spiritually or as an idea or thought. And here's the logic behind that. Let me turn this down. I always run into these commercials. I try to play some nice background music for you, but I always run into these commercials. Here's the logic or thought behind that. And I have to keep this just under 20 minutes, I think, for Facebook. Thank you for following me, by the way. If you enjoy what you're hearing and some of the things you're sending in, if we're answering your questions, if you like it, feel free to advertise. As many people as watching, the better. If I go outside onto the porch and I see a UFO, if I physically step up into a ladder, or say, and into a UFO, a metal disc is what I'm talking about. And I have the ability, then if that UFO is a time traveling UFO, what that means is now I base that type of travel over distance, and that's totally different, because now I'm basing my traveling experience on probability and physical speed. And here's what I mean by that. If I go out at past or sufficiently past 186,000 miles per second, I have the ability then that time and space, once time and space become the same, then I have the ability to control the realms that are under me, in this case here. If I'm flying through them in a physical disk out in space, or even over the surface of the Earth, in the air, it's totally different, because now my time travel is based on speed. So approaching at 185,999 miles per second, I begin to approach light speed, and then time travel becomes possible in that sense. So there's a lot of different ways to think about time travel. The second part of that question was, if yes, how would you prove it as it pertains to the grandfather paradox? I think we answered that question. Second one is concerning light speed. We just talked about that. How can we be sure that our maximum velocities are reached only at 186,000 miles per second? And frankly, I have to say, Mr. So-and-so Bureau of Secret Intelligence, we are quite honored and flattered that you would follow us and seem to write us. Maybe you'll send me an application or resume or something like that. I don't know. 500,000 a year, a million a year. Just kidding. It says, concerning light speed, how can we be sure that our maximum velocities are reached at 186,000 miles per second? He says, or are they? Well, you guys would know better than anyone, but my take on it is a little bit different than your guys' take. Maximum velocities are not reached at 186,000 miles per second. There are theories that exist that beyond the speed of light that you can have when photons begin to break up. So you have particles of light that are photons in whole. I'm going to stop and we'll come right back. I'm at 19 minutes here. Hold on just a second, guys. Sorry about that.